let us know that you can hear us, that you see us. Maybe you can put a plus into the chat just to make sure that technically everything works. And if you can, just let us know from where are you, where are you located, from which country. Okay, I see technically we are good. Vienna, Moscow. Hello, Alfredo. Let us know that you can hear us, that you see the slide, and myself perfectly. Okay, I think maybe some other participants will join, but we're already 2 minutes after 1 p.m. Moscow time, so I would suggest we start right away. So thank you for registering and for being interested into this to these developments. While we're speaking, things are moving fast. So let us introduce ourselves. Those who know us, those who don't know us, Schneider Group is a multidisciplinary advisory company, basically serving clients in the field of accounting outsourcing, legal, tax, and compliance services. We provide a mass of IT solutions for our clients in Russia and the Eurasian countries. We have an interim management service line, and we consider ourselves to be a one-stop shop for foreign investors in our markets, where we act as the back office and where you can focus on your business only. So we picked up this topic because we have reached a lot of questions from our clients. Very many people are concerned how to be and how to treat with this. So today, me, myself, Alex Stolarski, I'm the attorney and partner here in Schneider Group, together with my colleague Denise Bushnev, who's sitting here across this table. We will guide you through these topics. Denise, you want to say a few words?
So I'm here as a team leader for Labor Immigration Practice Group, and I'm here with Alex to answer your questions and answer to those questions which are frequently asked by our clients and business partners.
I just see that someone cannot hear us. Are we dealing with this technically? So let us know if something is going wrong, just to make sure that you all are with us. Just comment, please. Okay, so Denise and I will guide you through the topic. We planned approximately 1 hour, but we will see how things goes, because it depends also on your questions and how everything went through. So I said already, things are moving fast, and while we're speaking, it's developing. We will try to provide you with the facts and the legal requirements. We are not making any assessment on the medical implications and about the conditioning of that virus spreading, because we are not the experts in that field. We are lawyers, and we want to provide you with the information necessary to know how to deal with the facts. We will do then a lot of Q&A, answering basic important questions that we think have a lot of practical impact. And then we will also try to give you some sort of guidance, how to make sure that business continuity is assured, how to make sure that your activities in Russia are not in danger. Okay, I see. So again, that people can hear us, so we continue with the agenda. So let's get straight to the facts, just to know what actually is happening right now. What are we speaking about today, Denise?
So if you briefly go through the all facts, we had on March 2020 the mayor decree on, so the main decree on implementation of high alert regime. This was followed by another additional decree on ban of mass events. And under these documents, right now we have an obligation for those citizens who came from countries where the virus registered. They must do particular obligations. They must report on their return. They must call to the particular phone number, which is on the screen right now, inform about the country where they came from, whether they have any symptoms. If they have such symptoms, they must go apply to medical staff to checked promptly and abide and be abided by the instructions of such medical staff, maintain self-isolation.
So what is important is you should not go straight to the hospital. You should in-call medical assistance. That's clearly said in the decree of the Moscow mayor, not to go to the hospital, but to do in-call medical assistance.
Right.
And okay, and follow the instructions. So as we said, events are moving fast, and just yesterday, the World Health Organization characterized the coronavirus situation worldwide as a pandemic, which immediately again has effects on the markets, as we see, also on the ruble. It's heavily affected, together with the oil war that is currently taking place. This has many impacts on the business environment as well. So we see this is really a situation that is critical and can maybe even become more critical. Furthermore, from tomorrow on, as was announced yesterday, Russian flight connections with Germany, Italy, Spain, and France are temporarily limited, partly suspended even to some countries. So I know for Germany, I think only Berlin and Frankfurt are being, or maybe also Munich again, is being considered as a destination. All other flights are cancelled and certainly restricted. And also from March 13, that means from tomorrow on, there's a temporary ban to issue Russian visas for Italian citizens, because Italy is heavily affected. There are also some exemptions for diplomats and for other types of visas, but as a general rule, for example, tourist visa are not being issued anymore for Italian citizens. And we also heard this morning, when I woke up, I heard that President Trump announced a 30-day ban, travel ban, to entry the USA from Europe as a general. So no distinction between countries. The UK is not included because they Brexited, but we see now a 30-day ban for entry to the US, which is also something to bear in mind. And as we said, things are really moving fast. So let's get back to the facts. What are the legal requirements under the decree of the Moscow mayor? If you arrive or spend time in one of the 7 countries that is being listed in the decree of the Moscow mayor, which means from China, South Korea, Italy, Iran, France, Germany, or Spain, if you came from one of these countries, you are obligated to register yourself under the hotline, to stay in self-isolation for 14 days, and monitor then, according to your well-being, the situation, and when necessary, also call the doctors. What cannot be confirmed, and even we in our newsletter that we issued right away on Friday evening, we referred to unconfirmed media reports that the Russian watchdog authority Rospotrebnadzor extended the list to USA, UK, Switzerland, and Norway. As of today, we cannot confirm that these countries are listed. So only the 7 countries that are being here in bold: China, South Korea, Italy, Iran, France, Germany, or Spain. But this is not an exhaustive list. This list can be extended. And again, while we're speaking, this might happen, might take place. So we need to closely monitor basically every day or every few hours what actually is happening. Of course, this has major impact for all businesses in Moscow. So if we speak about obligations of employers, there are certain instructions in the decree as well. And just yesterday evening, the Rospotrebnadzor, the Russian watchdog authority, issued an exhaustive, quite comprehensive list of recommendations, so-called recommendations for employers. So Denise, give us a quick overview on these measures that employers and that we also as Schneider Group immediately implemented in our company, and what others have to do.
Yeah, so first of all, what all employees must do is measuring temperature on a regular basis for all employees they come to the office. What we do, we even try to measure temperature for those persons who just visit our office, just to make sure that so if something happens and we see that some of persons feel themselves unwell, we suspend persons from from work and assist them in maintaining self-isolation at home. Such persons must immediately provide information about their state of health, and they must call to the hotline, inform which contacts they had during this period, and ensure that what employers must do as well is ensure that once such persons are isolated, all premises of offices are properly disinfected due to this, right? So, and as we mentioned before, the decree was supplemented with another decree which prescribes that all mass events must be banned until April 10th, 2020. And we see that due to the current virus situation, this term most probably will be prolonged.
So we will see. I mean, I would not go so far to make like real predictions. What we know exactly is April 10. Until then, mass events to be considered with 5,000 participants or more. One can argue about why events with 3,000 participants are considered to be okay and 5,000 not anymore, but this is a different issue. So basically, this has major impact on any sport event, any cultural events that are bigger, like 5,000 people usually, theater, or I mean, events of big significance, so usually, yes, you have to really take care of all these measures and make sure that this is being implemented properly. I just see a question about referring to the previous topic of what about Italians who have a work visa and work here. So I think there will be exemptions for people who work here and who have a, let's say, status of, for example, highly qualified specialist whatsoever. But I cannot confirm at the moment how far really this ban on issuing visas will be implemented on new visas. I think those who have a visa and have a work here are not being affected. I would say that. So it doesn't say anything right now on those who are here already legally.
Right. This is directly prescribed to those persons, regardless of their citizenship, who return from the affected countries. Right.
Yeah. Yesterday, we also interesting news reached us. There's a draft law in the making, which may also have heavily impacted. This may be not so closely related to the current coronavirus, but yeah, Dennis, there's a draft law that somehow worries us as well, right?
Yeah, this draft law is the intention of this draft law is to expand the with regard to coronavirus, but other infections that are dangerous for the population. But let's start from the beginning. This draft law has an aim to establish a database and a system for monitoring of epidemic situation in the state. All information about foreign citizens who arrive to Russia, who do any obligatory medical checks or periodic medical checks, all this information should be included in this database. All additional medical certificates on lack of HIV, drug addiction, or dangerous infections for those who need to obtain permanent or temporary residence permit. This will be a must under this draft law. Moreover, those persons who go to Russia are having the relevant visa, they will be obligated to have an additional confirmation of lack of dangerous infections within 30 calendar days once they cross the border and arrive to Russia, which even more make even more burden to those foreign citizens who already work here. So, and moreover, and the most dangerous clause which we see right now is a clause on annulment of work permit if such notification was failed to file to state authorities. So it's quite strict draft law right now.
Yeah. So we will monitor this as well, certainly. Alexander is currently asking any idea whether authorities might ease up on the registration rules. As we know, maybe as a recap for everybody, highly qualified specialists are not obligated to register with it, or they have 90 days time to register. So usually highly qualified specialists or foreigners or experts like me, we're traveling a lot. So basically once in 90 days, I, for example, leave the country. And I think most of HQS as well. But what happens if we now sort of sit in Moscow, yeah, cannot go back to Germany, Italy, Spain, France, and the other countries, and sort of sit here and wait how the situation develops. So the question indeed, if we now sit in Moscow for 90 days or stay in Russia for 90 days, what about then? Because then we have to register at the place where we live, and many of us rent apartments, and not every landlord is ready to register under his address. So this is a practical implication. But here, I think the question is, the answer would be very easy. What comes to my mind spontaneously? Why don't you go then to Finland or to Belarus for a day or two, Belarus, or to any other country that is not in that list? Yeah. So as long as you leave Russia within the 90 days, and then you come back, and then the 90-day term starts the time starts to tick again. Yeah. So I would say spontaneously that is the answer, Alexander. In that case, if you intend to go back to Germany, so maybe that would not be possible, but any other country in that situation could be the case. That's understood. Question is if any of those countries put Russia on the quarantine list. Well, currently the countries that are on this list are the 7 countries that we mentioned in the beginning. Again, this is in development, and it can be extended anytime. And as I said, while we're speaking, maybe this is even the case. So this has to be monitored. Of course, if you then go to Turkey, and during that stay, Turkey is then on the list, then you're also obliged to come back and stay on self-isolation. But the 90 days in that case, they sort of start to tick again. There are certain legal consequences in case you do not follow the rules. Would you elaborate on that a bit, Dimitri?
Sure. Yeah. So what we know for sure right now is that the legal consequences may vary from the administrative warning up to even a criminal prosecution and a real term of imprisonment for up to 5 years. So it of course depends on the severity of violation, depends on the circumstances on a case-by-case basis, but still all these measures and all these terms and conditions are still workable right now. They're not cancelled due to this new decree.
So that's a theoretical side, yeah. So you have something from warning to real criminal responsibility, but the immediate question that we have is, of course, how is that monitored? Yeah. So we just heard yesterday of a case where a guy who was under self-isolation went out to the supermarket to get a beer and then go back home, and in that moment the police came, yeah, to sort of
just to check
up on him, and that's something that has to bear in mind. So what the authorities said is, and we will come to that in the Q&A, the authorities said that with face recognition technology and more than 100,000 cameras all over the city, it is being monitored how people who are obligated to stay in self-isolation will move around. And it is certainly, due to the instructions, not allowed to just go to the supermarket or just go to any places where people gather. And you may only maybe walk your dog or go to the supermarket if there's no other mean or no other way to get food. And even then you should do that in a mask, and even then only in times when it's not so crowded, so not during rush hour. That's also part of the instructions. So let's get into frequently answered questions, or Q&A, things that we ask ourselves, questions that reach us, and while we're speaking, you are addressing questions to us, which we will try to catch up with and reply to them also during that webinar. So first one is, does this decree apply only to Moscow or other cities as well? And what kind of category of people are affected? Yeah, does it apply to those citizens of these countries or any other people as well? Let's elaborate on that quickly.
So the decree which mayor issued is applies to Moscow only. But what we know for now is that Novgorodsky Oblast from Veliki Novgorod also issued more or less the same decree, but still having a recommendations, not obligations for citizens and employers. What we have right now is that this decree applies to Moscow and it has particular obligations, both for citizens and for physical persons and for companies. This decree applies to those persons who returns from countries where the coronavirus cases registered. So it's quite a wide range of countries, quite a big list of them, and those who go from the affected 7 countries, which must follow particular strict obligations with self-isolation from the very beginning once they enter Russia.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it applies to everybody. Yeah?
Right.
It applies to everybody, and for example, and this is also a kind of similar questions that's being addressed here in the chat. So, do the rules apply even if I arrive to Moscow while having spent 1 hour only at Charles de Gaulle in Paris? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So just in transit. Yeah. I was originally maybe coming from Vienna and have a stopover, although it doesn't make much sense. But anyway, from any other country, from London, for example, and then go to Paris, and from Paris to Moscow.
No. So what we have from the hotline services and what we were informed about this is that how much time you spend in the country. Once you enter this, even through the transit, it works.
Yeah.
So decree applies to such persons.
There will be a ticket which says Paris, Moscow, and that alone is reason enough at the border control to sort of, well, to trigger the obligation. And Erica is asking, what about having a layover in Moscow? Yeah. So she's traveling from France and has a 20-hour layover in Moscow. And does she has to isolate herself? She doesn't leave the airport. To my understanding, there would be, I mean, if you don't leave the transit zone, there will be no passport control immediately at that point. Yeah.
Right.
So you're not entering Russia, and in that case, if you're not being checked, so if you stay really the 20 hours in the transit zone, and then just leave again to the next city destination, then I would say spontaneously it does not apply because, well, you haven't entered formally Russia. Although again, with the argument, even if you spent a transit in France, you have not formally crossed the border. To be fair, yeah. So there's no really clear answer on that. But again, I don't think there won't be a passport check during transit if it's just a layover, and then you spend 20 hours in the airport.
Yeah, true.
So what about if I arrive to Moscow through one of the unfavorable countries, which are again the 7 countries listed? We said it. So these are applicable. Sorry. So what about what really is important? I think also. What about business travelers? So there's a plan, or our business partners are planning to come to Moscow for like 2 or 3 days, and they come from Germany.
Yeah. So quite interesting. This is one of the first questions that we received from our business partners, and we understood from the very beginning that it will not apply literally, I would say, for such persons. So if they arrive for a short period of time, right now there is no need and there is no obligation to stay for 14 days of isolation. So if you have a 3 days business or personal travel to Russia, you should understand that once you cross the border, you should isolate yourself for this short period of time at the place of your current stay, but not for 14 days. This is what we have confirmed with the hotline services and with the officials who reply to similar questions.
And before we elaborate further on that, let's get right to the next question. What actually does self-isolation mean? And is a hotel room, for example, considered to be an appropriate place for self-isolation? So this is really interesting, because what we heard when we called the hotline is, let's say, well, staying at home sort of makes sense if you sort of self-isolated and with prescribed term without visiting any public places, including medical institutions, as it was said. But they told us that, yeah, staying in a hotel room would be considered to be sufficient. So I personally have doubts on this and on the rule of staying 2-3 days, because if the intention is to prevent the spreading of the virus, and why is it 14 days? Because what the medicals say is that this is the term of the incubation period of the virus. And in that case, if you enter the country, use the public transport, go to a hotel where you check in, you stay in a hotel room for 2-3 days, although again, this doesn't make any sense, and most of the people are canceling now their trips to Moscow. But again, if you do that, 2-3 days spent in a hotel room, then again, check out, use the public transport, go to the crowded airport, and then leave the country. And that during that time, I think if you're really sick, the probability is high that you that infection is being spread. So, in my sense, regulation, as we hear, for example, in the news, that Israel is taking place, they are basically shutting down and not letting in people into the country who cannot prove that they will be self-isolated, certainly for 14 days, not in a hotel.
Right.
I mean, that's a harsh measure, maybe one of the harshest that we see currently, but it's consequent and maybe more logic than what we see here.
I would like to add, due to this question, is that for now we have 3 countries which are on a strict limitation of visit for citizens from these countries. For example, China, Republic of Iran, and South Korea. Those persons and those citizens who go through these countries may even be limited with crossing the borders. So this is a matter not only a self-isolation of persons from these countries, but even ban for entry Russia. So it depends on particular cases, but we've already heard that some Chinese citizens try to cross the border and they fail to do that because the officers did not let them go to Russia. So it works like that with these 3 countries as well.
Yeah. Another question. Today we have March 12th. The decree came into force or was issued on March 5, so basically a week ago. What about those who entered Moscow maybe on March 3 or March 2? If they came from Germany or France or Italy, literally the incubation period would not be over yet.
Right.
There was one question that also reached us, and what we asked ourselves, what about that? And we called the hotline, and interesting answer we received, right?
Yeah, and if to read the official paper on that, there is no indication of retroactive effect of the decree. So it doesn't work like that. But still, it shouldn't work like that. But what officials do right now, they are implementing this with retroactive effect, with using this 14 days period. So those people who arrived early, they may be affected.
Not even arrived. You spent, well, if you spent time, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, China, South Korea, and Iran within the past 14 days, you basically would be obligated to be still in self-isolation.
Yeah, true.
But anyway, the question is how this will be monitored, because the rule came only into effect and came to knowledge on March 5 and the day after. But this just for information that this can also be a topic. So as an employer, maybe you would have to inquire who actually spent, and then to verify really whether still any consequences. There's also a question, what about St. Petersburg? Jean-Louis is asking. Well, this is a Moscow regulation, and as we said, Novgorod Oblast is something similar. And again, maybe we're not aware of all other regions still, but this is what we found out during that short period of time. St. Petersburg is not affected, but if you sort of try to trick the system and say, okay, I go to St. Petersburg and then I go to France and then I come back to St. Petersburg and then I enter Moscow again, in my understanding, that rule would apply, because you're entering Moscow by any means of transportation, whether that's via the airport or via the train, or any other means. Another question is how will it be monitored, but this is your risk and your obligation to follow the rules, and your risk if you violate the rules. but it should be very clear that even if you come into Russia through another city, but then you intend to stay time in Moscow, you intend to spend time in Moscow, this rule will apply. Yeah?
Right.
So we just elaborated on that, on the retrospectivity. So let's imagine, indeed, someone gets sick and truly needs to be hospitalized, and spends time in self-isolation at home, and all the symptoms are being interpreted as urgent and to being hospitalized. What about family members and people who are with this person?
Yeah, and in practice, all these cases are so quite real, and all these circumstances, all these consequences raises on a case-by-case basis. So once the infected person informed about his state of health, medical checks is a must for them. They must inform medical staff about any contacts that they had within the incubation period. And once these persons are indicated and checked in what instances, so what was the closeness of the contracts and continuity of such contacts. So once it is analyzed, medical staff may make a decision to isolate them as well. So all these consequences must be considered and assessed on a case-by-case basis each time.
And again, regarding other regions, just to close up on that, if you're not entering Moscow, this is a Moscow rule. This is a ruling of the Moscow mayor, and there is a ruling of the governor of the Novgorod Oblast, and other regions might follow. We have no knowledge currently that this refers to St. Petersburg or other cities as here. So we are speaking today really about and basically about the Moscow rules that do apply. Yeah.
Right.
Another very practical question. So going to self-isolation. Yeah. So you come to work, they measure increased temperature, and there's also one question that is reaching us here. What this means, increased temperature. Yeah. I cannot recall that I found a definition of really increased temperature in that case. I know, for example, from other colleagues, not from our firm, who work here, they received an instruction from their HR department that if temperature is higher than 37.2, we are obligated to send you home. So I think there should be a consultation with doctors. What really is? I mean, because indeed, if you speak about 6 and 7, is that increased? Yeah, or give that reason to send someone for self-isolation. I think it's a very case-by-case thing that you have to look at the general health condition. So it's actually a good question. What would be really the sort of the guideline, if there is any? Maybe the public authorities can elaborate on that, because it be clear 36 and 9 is increased, right? But is it? Yeah. I mean, people still work with and feel good with 37 and 5. I myself not, but so again, so you're being sent to self-isolation, and this means you are considered to be as if sick, right? And that has impact on the compensation.
Right.
So
correct. So once you inform about the state of health, and if you have a high temperature, and you inform hotline about your self-isolation, right now all medical staff and these persons who work hotline, they initiate an immediate issuance of sick leave certificate to be transported to such persons without need to visit any hospitals or other medical institutions. This works like very quickly, and once you receive such medical certificate, you're entitled to have, if you are registered with medical and social security system in Russia, it depends. You are entitled to have a state sick leave allowance, which is quite low, of course, and is not in comparison with the actual salary of most of our employees, but still, they to such compensation, and employers are not obligated to compensate fully for such term of self-isolation. However, if employers, like we do, for example, provide tools and all equipment to arrange remote work, and these employees under the instructions of the employer work fully remotely at home, we consider that these times should be compensated fully. But still, all these issues are considered and assessed on case by case basis as well.
Maybe
Right?
maybe get back to
Yeah.
the legal side. So that means there is no obligation of the employer
No
to
obligation,
compensate,
right?
and there is
Yeah.
no such case foreseen by law that someone has to compensate. So you're
Yeah.
being paid by sick list
True.
regime,
Right.
which is usually lower than the actual salary, and that has to be taken into consideration. So, and then it's a question of mutual agreement with the employer and the working regime and all the documents you have in place in your company, of course, that regulate such situations. And that is a question maybe also of business continuity, how to, because maybe it's, and often it is in your own interest as an employer to make sure that people still work if they
Right.
feel good. Yeah. And
Yeah.
in that case, to provide for remote work capacities, and then also fully compensate the employees if it's not a misuse of that. Yeah, meaning knowing that a weekend spent in France leads to 2 weeks staying at home and being still fully compensated. I mean, surely this should be avoided, right?
Yeah.
So
True.
you have clear rules within the company prescribed and written down how such things are being taken care of in a unique way. And while Denise was speaking, I was checking up regarding the increased temperature question, and checked up the site of the World Health Organization, and there's actually some sort of guideline which says protection measures for persons who are with regard to the coronavirus, and it says self-isolate by staying at home if you begin to feel unwell. In the case of low-grade fever, 37.3 Celsius or above. I think we can take this as a sort of indication, and that explains actually because why someone will be sent home with 37.2 or 37.3. So this, I think, answers the question about what was meant by high body temperature, and what you as an employer need to do to assure and to monitor in case someone shows these symptoms. So let's move on as time is being, and we have still some slides. So again, if the employee has such increased temperature, that brings us back to what we just discussed, without confirmation of being infected, and he still feels good, yeah, he or she, should we still suspend an employee, and should we fully pay in case of suspension? I think that question has been answered already, but the suspension, is that a must?
Yes, under this decree, for all employers that have such persons on place, they must suspend them from work, which means that they should suspend them from the workplace, let them go at home, and ensure their self-isolation. And unfortunately, for such employees, their time not worked out during the suspension from work is not compensated at all.
Another thing that really is interesting. So one thing is business trips, right? So many companies are now sort of reviewing or canceling business trips, especially to the affected countries, to the so-called unfavorable countries. But what if employees plan their vacation? Easter is approaching, and summer families are planning summer trips. And does an employer has the right to ban any visits or to forbid employees to visit such countries for private reasons, for personal reasons?
Yeah. We consider such measures as too strict and illegal, actually. That's so, but still, there is no ban to agree with employees on particular travel. So try to resolve these situations amicably, just to try to explain to such a place that they shouldn't go to these countries due to particular legal consequences, and try to rearrange both business travels and vacations. And if it is agreed, just fixes this on a paper and fix it on an official HR vacation schedule, which will be obligatory both for employers and for employees.
Right. So again, there's no such thing that an employer can forbid anyone to travel privately wherever such person decides. But such person should know about the obligations, should know about the responsibility, and also the consequences. Because if you come back from such a country, I, for myself, traveled a family trip to Berlin last weekend because of that, knowing that if I come back, I will be obligated to stay in self-isolation for 2 weeks. And so there may be different scenarios. Some people have to go because of a family incident or because of a whatsoever reason. I think the right way, and thinking practically, would be to address this beforehand to the employer and find an amicable solution on that case. Because if it's easy to just change the direction, then I also understand that it's not in the interest of employers to sort of support such behavior as well. Yeah, again, legally it cannot be forbidden, but there's no harm in making clear to employees as well that this is not very welcomed, and that such things have to be found in a dialogue. Solutions for that have to be found in a dialogue. I think that will be the appropriate way to minimize also harm for the companies and for the employees as well, because traveling to that countries is also an exposure to risks currently. Yeah. So that has to be bear in mind. An interesting other question is the decree applicable also for employees who are registered or live outside Moscow region but are employed at the Moscow company? So they're coming to Moscow every day to work here?
Yeah, actually, it is applicable to such person anyway because they work there. So anyway, they are subject to prescriptions and subject to the effect of the mayor's decree right now. So we had such practical issues with such persons who live out of Moscow but still work here. And actually, we had received the relevant confirmation from the hotline that it works directly like this. So if you work in Moscow, the decree applies.
I see a question from Irina in the chat, so which says, if you travel from a different city in Russia to unaffected countries and return to a different city which has no such orders as Moscow mayor, do the rules apply? So if you travel from a different city in Russia, which is not Moscow, which has not that regime implemented, to an unaffected country, meaning to any other country which is not listed in that decree, and then return to a different city in Russia, and then still come to Moscow, well, then they're not, because there's no trigger.
Yeah,
but if you meant this, not an unaffected, but if you travel to a or an affected country, then you basically spent time during the past 14 days in such an affected country. And if you then come to Moscow, I would say it applies.
It applies, true. And of course, it's a matter of controlling and a matter of monitoring the situation and such persons who arrive in such a way. But still, it is prescribed to at least call to the hotline and inform that you have visited this affected country within the last 14 days.
So you're welcome still to drop your question and comments also into the chat. Please do so, because we are collecting this, and we will issue again also new information on the actual developments, and we'll try to issue a new updated newsletter on that as well. So we will try to wrap up some Q&A at the end. Let us discuss a little bit about, so if you're running a business in Russia, what kind of business continuity measures you can take in order to ensure, or in order sort of to minimize risks for your company. So first of all would be to review the assessment of the business risks, right? And to develop really a continuity plan that assures, that foresees different scenarios and makes gives sort of instruction for employees and staff how to behave and what to do, how to act in certain situations. Then another thing would be to evaluate the legal commitments you have in your agreements, in your contractual relationships, and also with your clients, maybe, and third-party agreements. Yeah. What happens if you're exposed to litigation because of that? What happens now because deals are not taking place, or someone is suing you for not delivering on time, or for whatsoever? So how is legal support ensured during that time? And what I think is also very important, what are the responsibilities and the liabilities of the CEO and the management staff in the company for taking the internal measures and external measures against business partners, but also against employees and in front of the government authorities? Because I think this is something where every CEO, every general director should be very aware now of this. Yeah. So first thing is, in order to make sure, if we speak about internal perspective, to inform the employees on the implementation of the decree, and that you as an employer really take it serious. Yeah. So it is recommended and even prescribed that you make sure that you disinfect toilets or kitchens and stuff several times a day, that you make sure that people are sanitizing their hands and washing their hands regularly. For example, in our conference room, we have now also the disinfectants staying here for use, and throughout the office, several measures have been taken in order to ensure that we are following the rules. So we are taking this very seriously, and our recommendation certainly is that every company is really developing also the internal instructions and gives the outlines the procedures how to make sure that legislation is followed and how to make sure that we are administering the whole situation. And if you really need to come personally to Russia to take place in business meetings, then you might look for alternative locations. For example, St. Petersburg, or for example, Minsk, yeah, in Belarus. As a foreigner from Europe, you don't need a visa for Minsk, as far as I know. Or maybe you need this, needs to be checked, but again, so it could be easy to relocate if you still need to meet in person. Otherwise, there are a lot of facilities now how to make sure that you still have video conferencing or any other mean of online meetings, which of course is not a real substitution for face-to-face time, but at least give some sense to and chance to discuss business. From a practical point of view, what about if you have an expert as a general director implemented in the Russian company, and he's stuck in Germany, for example, now, or doesn't, or any other reason that doesn't allow him to fully exercise his obligations now. So there's the chance under Russian law to appoint, for example, an administrative general director, a CEO, where you have introduce some changes to the charter documents. You need to make changes with the bank signature rights, adopt internal policies. So that is a service that many of you know, we at Schneider Group do offer. It's called the interim management services, where we are providing an administrative director just to ensure that you stay compliant with the laws, and still then the operational staff can focus on the business processes and make sure that sales are not going down too much, and that still client service is being fully considered. So we outlined some of these things that we consider that you should take into consideration. For example, also outsourcing functions of areas of accounting and IT, or other things that should be bear in mind, because many of you have heard it's not only the virus. We are hit by another crisis which is now currently taking place between Russia and some Arab countries on the oil price. It immediately had effect on the Russian ruble, which I think is above 80 against the euro this morning again. So you're facing certain forex collisions and forex problems. So you might need to adopt your budgeting and take certain measures regarding the forex impact, and look at the financial sides of your business in order to make sure also that debt management and debt control is being monitored and being implemented in a way that allows to fully exercise business. So our colleagues from the CFO services within Schneider Group are issuing now also additional information on these aspects, and I think they're also planning a webinar sometime week to elaborate on these aspects in much more detail. How to hedge risks, how to make sure you sort of decrease risks of these aspects. So I think we're basically through all our slides. So we still have a couple minutes to be engaged with you. So please ask your questions yeah, let us know what you think. Give us some feedback, and we're happy that basically everybody who registered stayed with us during that time. So please just drop your questions. We will try to answer as good as we can, and we still have a few minutes to spend together. So Erica, you say you have a question. Let us know it. Thank you, Alexander, for the good feedback. Well, basically, we tried to cover all questions that have been addressed to us during the last 50 minutes. I hope we answered all of them so far. Have there been any questions which we didn't address? So I live in France, I go to St. Petersburg, then I fly from St. Petersburg to Moscow, and then from Moscow to another country. Do I have to isolate myself? So I live in France, I go to St. Petersburg, then I fly from St. Petersburg to Moscow, and then from Moscow to another country. Well, if you spend, before entering Moscow, if you spend time in France the last 14 days, that would be now my reading, my understanding, then you would have to isolate if you enter Moscow.
Yeah, it's true. So I read this question. So as it's written right now in the decree, it should be implemented like that. So whether you have been in this country, affected country within the last 14 days, you still, even if you traveled to other cities, not subject to special decrees or special instructions from state authorities, you should at least inform the hotline that you visited the affected country, and then they will maybe instruct you what to do, and you should follow this.
Yeah. So some days is, again, if it's less than 14 days, then I guess not. So you mentioned Russian flight connections temporarily limited. Does it apply for foreign companies such as Air France? I must admit I don't have the full overview. I just read the news that Russia as a country is dismissing flight connections to many European cities.
Yes, some particular flights, number of flights are cancelled or just rescheduled or even limited with. So this should be monitored by yourself within the particular number of flight.
It would make sense to call Air France really to find out. I would assume if Russia as a country is canceling major destinations, and I think Paris, for example, is not included into that. Then all flights will be cancelled. But again, this needs to be elaborated. This is really breaking news that came in yesterday evening and without really specification yet. There was something about force majeure. Could you go back to this? Should it be considered as force majeure? If clients cancel previous agreements referring to this law, Clients can't travel as they're afraid to be placed under isolation, even if not from these countries. Is it an enough base for any refunds, or can we still dispute? What's the legal way? Okay, there are certain layers in that question. So first of all, it's not a law, it's a decree of the Moscow mayor, which has, basically, but again, just for the clarification, for framing it right, it is obligatory, but it's not the status of a federal law. Anyway, it's mandatory to follow the rule. Clients can't travel as they're afraid to be placed under isolation. Well, even if not from these countries, they're not, because well, if you're not from these countries, then it's just being afraid of what,
Yes.
then there is no legal rule to refer to. If you're not coming or from Germany, France, Spain, Italy, China, South Korea, Iran, then you don't fall under this rule currently. It also depends on the agreements. For example, if we speak about the ban of mass events, I think there will be a force majeure applied for concert organizers, for major happenings and events that need to be canceled now. The fact that there are certain travel restrictions do not free you from pay for a service or a work that you ordered, and do not free you from delivering anything that you're obligated by contract to deliver. So in some cases, a force majeure might apply, but again, we have to see the perspective and the context of the contractual arrangements as well. So not in any case, but basically it is an act, it is a governmental act that places certain measures, and in some cases, force majeure, I think, can be referred to, but certainly not in just general contractual obligations, or because someone is afraid to travel to Russia now. I would not think that this is reason enough. What is the enforcement practice in Moscow? How big is the risk of being caught? So what we thank you, Benjamin. What we hear is that, and actually, I mean, I also speak to many of colleagues and experts. Not everybody is following it right away, because maybe in the beginning or end of last week, before the holidays, also the extended weekend, nobody really thought. First of all, maybe not everybody heard about it right away. Then once they read the news, they didn't take it too seriously. So, and I know that some maybe didn't follow it, and there was no consequence. But authorities say they use face recognition technology, and there are more than 100,000 surveillance cameras throughout the city, and people are being registered, and the authorities sort of know, or should know, who is obligated to stay under self-isolation. It's difficult to assess the risk of being caught, because it's quite a gamble. And even if the consequence would be just an administrative fine, we should all know that as foreigners, if you receive 2 administrative fines, that already is reason enough to be extracted from the country. In some cases, or for example, your work permit will not be extended or will be revoked. So. And of course, from a lawyer, you will not get the recommendation to break the rules or to break the law. From a practical aspect, again, we're all grown up, and everybody is responsible for its own actions. Our aim here is to give you and to share with you information that we know. What about trade shows, fairs in Moscow? Well, first of all, what I see, and many conferences I intended to attend this year and throughout the summer are being cancelled. One after the other right now are being cancelled, unfortunately, also to some extent. But and fairs in Moscow, we also see that many events are being cancelled. So just follow up with the organizers and make sure that you have the right information. There's not a general rule on trade shows. Mass events of people gathering more than 5,000 people are being banned until April 10. That's what we can say for sure. And then we know that big gatherings are being treated by the organizers on a risk assessment basis. So it's 2 p.m. We spend 1 hour together. Are there still there's still a few questions, right? There's a big list, yeah. Russia's not informing foreign countries. Can you put that on the screen, please? Russia's not informing. Wow, Russia's not informing. What is that about Finland? Russia's not informing foreign countries very well enough or barely at all about this decree. If one does not get information from partners like you, they don't even know when coming over. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next one. Let's try to make as much as possible. I think we can spend another 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah, give me the long one. Finland. Is that how it starts? Finland is the neighbor. How do you see the risk of list to be expanded to Finland? I'm sorry, I'm not in the business of making predictions. I don't know, to be honest. Yeah, and that's what I said in the beginning. We try to share as much as we know as of today. Any moment, the list can be expanded. Denise, would you maybe add something on that? Yeah.
So what we see right now is that Roskomnadzor, also the watchdog of the state authorities right now, publishing each day the list of countries with the statistics of registered infections. What we see right now that the most risky and considered as dangerous countries right now are exceeding 1,000 cases. Of course, we're not predicting right now, but still what we see right now is that once this number is more than 1,000 or of course more, it is on a short list, I would say right now, and on the list of the most risky countries to be possibly considered as an affected, and with further expansion of the list under the state decrees or other orders of state authorities.
Julia, do we have some more questions? Because I do not see them here right now. Seems to me that we answered, hopefully, at least to some extent, the questions you have. We ask for understanding if we could not elaborate really on everything and provide full clarification, because this is things in development. We are dealing with this as you are, and this is something that nobody could be really prepared for, and we have to take situations as they come. And we will continue sharing with you information. Thank you very much for your attention, for being with us. Yeah, we will keep you up to date. Tomorrow we will do the same exercise. We will do this I will do it in German language for our German-speaking clients and business partners. And then together with Denise, we will do another webinar in Russian, where we also have already many registrations. So thank you all very much for being with us, and we will keep you up to date and posted. So please follow us on our site and the social media, and we will keep you informed.
We wish you good health. We wish you good health, first of all.
Stay healthy.